the 360 on Energy and Carbon podcast, hosted by 360 Energy. On today's episode, we will be continuing the discussion from last week.
Is there scope, and this is a loaded question, is there scope for optimization, computer-based optimization of conditions?
For sure, and a lot of them already have control systems that manage their CO2 levels, that manage their lighting, that manage the temperature set points in the day and nighttime, manage their curtains. So a lot of them have shading curtains covering the sides of the greenhouse and the top of the greenhouse. So there are control systems that manage that. However, if you have a certain set point and it's pretty much like, okay, 17.5 during the day, it's basically like the temperature at your home, right? It's going to keep it at 17.5 the whole day.
Yeah, these control systems, and I hope people get a sense because sometimes people think agriculture is not that sophisticated. I mean, actually, agriculture is probably one of the most sophisticated organizations because their profit margins are so low. So they have to be really efficient. So these control systems are high end. They've been in the business for a long time. But John, you bring up a good point because we're actually doing some research that hopefully we'll be able to bring out soon, that these control systems are top end, but they focus on environmental conditions. They don't focus on future weather or market pricing conditions. And we think there is an opportunity to still achieve those environmental conditions that a customer wants, but also optimize. We'll be coming up with that hopefully in the next 6 months.
Your market conditions there, you're referring to the energy market, not the produce market.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Well, by the way, it could also consider product because pricing of product could have an impact on how much money you want to spend on energy as well.
Couldn't it? Yes, it's a fair point. If you knew that you could boost your production for a particular market requirement. Yeah, so it can be quite sophisticated. I'm going to ask one more question, I think, and then I think we'll ask Sandra an interesting question. But the question I'm going to just throw at you, we've been talking about greenhouses, greenhouse effects, CO2 and everything else. And Sandra made the point, greenhouses love CO2. So why on earth should they be bothered about this net zero business?
I'll take a stab first, Sandra, and you want to jump in? I think what's happening is like alarm bells are going off everywhere on climate change. And, CO2 is a friend to the greenhouse. But I think more and more customers like retailers, for example, Loblaws, Walmart, other organizations, they are starting, if they haven't already, asked for their customers to tell them what they're doing to reduce the carbon footprint. And I think it's still early in the greenhouse industry, but I think there'll be more and more pressure. In fact, we know, Sandra and I were on a call with the Essex County, and there's a forecast of requirement of reducing the carbon footprint in the greenhouse industry because that's such a big part of it. So it's coming, but it's not an easy fix. There's got to be a lot of thought process involved. So I think we're encouraging clients to start thinking about this because they will have to do something. Do you want to add on something on that, Sandra, based on your experience?
Yeah, I would just say all greenhouse owners that I've met are very much business people. They are very focused on the business, how they're running it. They're running it just like a manufacturing plant, but it just doesn't look like one. So I think a lot of people kind of miss that fact. So I would say for greenhouses to take climate change and their CO2 emissions seriously, then you're going to need to be talking money. So in Ontario, at least right now, greenhouses, Dave, is it 80%?
80%, yeah, they get it back.
Greenhouses get an 80% carbon tax reduction currently. So 80% is a huge chunk. Now let's say the government takes away that 80%. Now all of a sudden, all these greenhouses are paying 80% more on carbon tax. Well, a lot of them don't even know they have an 80% reduction.
Oh,
and
that's going to be a wake-up call.
Mm-hmm.
And what is currently scheduled for 2030, we're supposed to get to $170 a ton. And even with the 80% reduction, the greenhouse carbon tax will increase by 400% in the next 9 years. That, as Lysander said, I don't think many clients of our customers in the greenhouse industry have actually factored that in. That's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, and I
So
just want to say, I know we're referring to Ontario a lot, but all of these are applicable to whatever jurisdiction you're located in. It's just a matter of kind of a quick Google search. All this information can be found online. It's just people don't really know what to look for.
yes,
Yeah,
it's a really good point, Lysander. Like whether you're in Alberta, BC, Quebec, that there's typically the greenhouses have had some unique privileges because they're in the greenhouse industry and they're growing an essential crop. But it is all applicable. It's coming down. It doesn't matter, and even in the States too, by the way.
I do want to add something we kind of haven't talked about, and I've also been thinking about this over the last few episodes. So, unfortunately, our electricity grid, or fortunately, depending where you live, that's all we got. So let's say I live in Alberta. Carbon emissions are very high there. I can't do much to change it as a greenhouse. But if I live in Quebec, it's hydroelectricity. So I have a very clean grid. Or if I live in California, a lot of it's solar. So again, very little carbon emissions. So I'm kind of thinking, once we start doing this carbon tax thing on electricity and everything like that, some things are not in the control of these businesses. So what happens then?
yeah, you're going to get the thing, aren't you? That if you've got an opportunity to move your operation to a lower tax or cheaper operational area, you may well be looking at that. We've already seen that in some ways. I remember early days, a data center company talking about that they were moving to, and in fact, I think they were moving to BC because they could move there and claim that they were completely supplied with a green electricity supply and therefore overnight had changed, their output. So I think that does get interesting. But can I just come back to a little supplemental on this because we're talking about why should they do it and everything else. Do we think that there's any mileage with consumers seeing a carbon footprint label on the food products that they buy?
I think it's going to happen, John. I'm not sure the market or the greenhouse growers would have the knowledge or the information readily available to do it. They might see it as additional work, and these guys are
I'm
working
sure they would.
right. I think that's going to happen. So we'll see where that goes. I wanted to come back to what Lysander said, because we actually have a grower in Alberta that actually, so for all our listeners, Alberta is made up of coal and natural gas to make electricity. And so what they've done is they've built their own cogen and using natural gas, and they're mining old natural gas wells that are around their area. And so by doing that, they've actually reduced their carbon footprint as far as scope 2, because they're using natural gas versus relying on the grid. And then they're selling excess power when they're not using it. So there are clients that are actually thinking about this, that have that foresight, and they'll need to continue with that thought process going forward as well. I just wanted to mention that. I'm sorry I took you off your tack there, but I wanted to mention.
Yeah, to add on to that, actually, I don't think we mentioned this directly, but cogens are actually a really nice addition in a greenhouse, whether natural gas or biogas. And that is because they produce hot water, which will be used to heat the greenhouse. They produce electricity, which can be used for the base load or for the lighting or to send back to the grid. And they also produce CO2, which can be then used in the greenhouse after being cleaned by additional equipment.
When you do cogen like that, do you incorporate heat stores as well?
Yes, yes. So you heat storage, John, is that what you're referring to? Like,
Yeah, yes,
yeah.
so that you can because your cogen heat pattern may not match your heat requirement of your.
Oh yeah, you brought up something that I think Sandra and I just take for granted. So heat storage is common practice in the greenhouse industry. They have these massive boilers that they run, and if they can't use all the power, they actually store it. So how we've been talking about battery storage and how leading edge that is. Greenhouse industry has been doing this with heat storage for years. So yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we obviously didn't mention that before. And that's sophistication again on the grower and the technology that they use.
And most of them are these giant tanks, John,
Yeah,
that you would see kind of next to the
yeah.
greenhouse, and they're like super tall. They're huge tanks, and that's kind of what they use. Even if they don't have a cogen, they use that for their excess boiler.
Yeah, so you can argue that there is quite an interesting potential there, because if you've got a heat store, you could acquire heat from a range of different sources and put it into your heat store and then use it as and when.
We know of a grower that uses natural gas, uses biomass. They'll be exploring, solar thermal. Yes, the answer is you can use that for a variety of ways for sure.
I'd like to just go back a bit to add something, because I threw in the thing about what do you think that the marketplace would react to carbon footprint labels. I think it may be worth sharing an experience that we had here in the UK. The Carbon Trust, when they were government funded in this country, did a project to try to get footprint labels on some food products. And their leading edge one was what we call here crisps, and I think you guys call chips.
Chips.
Yeah, and they did it on that. And it didn't really take off. And I'm going to be blunt here. The reason it didn't take off was the cost and the work of the methodology that they had used for the footprint labels was massive. It was hoped that when some people went into the marketplace with it, it would encourage others to follow. But when they saw what the entry cost to get the footprint label was, they decided not to do it. And eventually the chip maker decided not to continue with it. But they did a number of products there. And I may be wrong on this. I think somebody associated with PepsiCo, somewhere else, tried coming up with another simplified, much easier process. But I think if we're going to see something like carbon labeling work in food, it's got to be really simple to do, mustn't be a major cost burden on the manufacturers, but it's also got to be something that we can get, or that the industry can accept across it. So you are able, I'm sorry, this is going to sound terrible, you are able to compare apples with apples, or
Yes.
peppers with peppers.
Peppers or tomatoes with tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you've got one greenhouse operation is using one methodology for its footprint, and another one uses another one, if the consumer's trying to make a decision based on the labels, that's not going to work.
It's actually a good piece of work for an organization to undertake. Maybe we should put that on our list, John, of things that we should think.
I think there's, if nothing else, it's an interesting conversation point, and it's also an interesting one to get people to look what goes into the product and where the various elements of carbon are coming from.
Yeah, I also want to add, I think we didn't really address it directly too much, but the diesel that's used to transport all this produce. And
Yes.
I think we kind of touched on it a bit, but I think it's really important to maybe next time you kind of go grocery shopping, take a look at your little label. Where is it made in? Where are you located? How many thousands of kilometers away is that? And that probably, no matter what, was probably brought over using a diesel transport system.
But Sandra, but watch out, because if it's a perishable product and it's come from a really long distance away, it's been air freighted,
Yes.
which is an even potentially a greater impact, maybe.
Right.
And then this hasn't to do with carbon footprint, but I find when it comes from another location, it tends to be picked early.
Mhm.
So the quality and the taste is not the same as if it was just picked freshly.
Yeah.
So that has an impact too.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how that part of the greenhouse industry transforms, because I know, we are looking at cleaner transport. So we're looking at electricity driven trucks, things like that. But what is going to kind of come first? Is it going to be the reduction right away, or are we going to have these new innovative trucks beforehand?
Now they can't be electric trucks, because they'll have to turn the lights off to plug the trucks in to charge them.
Yeah, we don't have the capacity for that.
No.
Hold on, guys. Just so you know, we are involved in a study. So, Sandra, I'm so glad you brought this up, because transportation is, 25% of the greenhouse gas scenario, and certainly heavy transport is a piece of that. But actually, we are involved with the University of Windsor studying heavy transport, and actually it's a greenhouse operator that will be looking at using electric batteries on transport to reduce their greenhouse footprint on the transportation side. So actually, there is work going on, and in fact, the University of Windsor, which Sandra is, currently a student of, is working in that area. So people are looking at this for sure. But John, your point about the demand cost certainly is a factor too. So
Yeah. I was going to say at that point, since you've mentioned about Lysandra and her involvement with the University of Windsor, would this be a good opportunity for you to tell us a bit more, subject to confidentiality, etc., a bit more about what you're doing?
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
I'm looking. Lysandra's done some great work, so I'm looking forward to her to explain the stuff that she's doing.
Yeah. So I've actually only been in the greenhouse industry for just over a year, but fully immersed in it. So I've learned a ton over the last year. Basically, my project works with the Ontario Electricity Sector Operator for Electricity, also known as the ISO. And I look at greenhouse energy solutions for the Leamington Kingsville area. So currently, there is a lack of electricity grid supply in that area, and there are so many growers and owners waiting to turn those lights on. So I'm looking at distributed energy resources, also known as DER solutions, to kind of meet that demand until the grid can catch up. So whether that be cogens, both on natural gas and biogas, solar, batteries. I personally don't look at wind, but that definitely is also an opportunity for a DER system in the area. And basically, I've honestly learned so much, and over the course of the year, have seen so many reactions from people in the industry for so long, looking at the data that I've been working with and being so surprised to see it compared in a certain way. So for instance, we talked about an unlit versus a lit greenhouse. So if I'm looking at an unlit versus lit greenhouse, a lit greenhouse uses 40 times the amount of electricity as an unlit greenhouse. So that's a huge statistic to think about. Another important one that I found very interesting is if we're looking at a 20-acre lit greenhouse or a 40-acre lit greenhouse, we are talking we need utility scale solar to meet that demand. So we're talking hundreds of acres of solar just to meet one greenhouse. And I think a lot of this information, people think of greenhouses and they don't understand the magnitude of these operations. I remember when I first entered one that was operated like a business, I was like, what is happening? It felt like I was in my old manufacturing job, and I'm just like, this is crazy, because I just thought it was, just people picking the crop, very casual, nothing like that. It's a full business that is run very professionally and needs the electricity, needs the natural gas, needs all this energy, needs the labor to make it happen.
And water too.
Water, yes.
Water as well.
Yeah, we've touched on water a couple of times, but I think when you actually think about growing, I mean, if you do any gardening or growing yourself, you know how critical water is. And yes, as you say, water's not just a case of somebody walking around with a watering can when we're on this scale, is it? Or even waving a hose pipe at it. You've got to have a very sophisticated, controlled watering system. You've got to get that water from somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating project. So we're involved in the same project with Lysandra and with Ontario Hydro and the ISO and the OGVG. It's great because there's a collaboration, and the University went. It's a collaboration of different people with different strengths, which I think is Lysandra's leading it, but I think the results and the information that's coming is fascinating, and not only helpful here in Ontario, but it will be used and can be used in other jurisdictions throughout the world, but I'm going to say North America for sure.
When you're talking about the world, can I just throw something in? And I'm thinking back, if we were talking here and we were looking for expertise in greenhouses, we would be talking to the Dutch.
We talked to them too.
Yeah, I think, John, they would be seen and are the leaders. I know there's some people here in Ontario that have some strengths in even more than the Netherlands in certain capacity because our industry is so big. But certainly the Netherlands is seen as the leading edge in the marketplace here, and I would think around the world too.
Yeah.
I want to add that there it is very common practice to have a cogen power your greenhouse. It's actually way more popular there than of course, that it is here. And that's because they do have the capacity to kind of attach back on the grid and give any excess to the grid. A lot of problems that we're finding here is these grids are not designed for that. They're not designed to have a bunch of, other operators connecting back into the grid. So it's a lot of catching up that we have to do, but I do think we're headed in the right direction.
And
Do
I
you
think,
think, I was going to say, do you think though, another dimension to it is historically electricity prices in Europe would have been higher than they would have been in North America. So the incentive perhaps to do something more on that side, because as we've said, you particularly have said, Sandra, grow as a businessman, and you've got to see the cost on it.
John, I think that's true, but I think also John Norman's discussion in the last podcast talking about how the regulators aren't keeping up. I think his points are a really good point, even based on what Sandra's saying on the greenhouse industry. So there's more to it, but certainly that's a factor.
Yeah, so we've got another podcast, haven't we, which is talking about how we get the grid right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's important.
Yeah.
I also want to touch on, in the 90s, obviously I don't know this by memory, but from research.
See if we can help you out, Lysandra.
Yeah.
Well, in the 90s, North America heavily relied on produce from Netherlands, Belgium, and Spain, and that wasn't too long ago, right? So in just 20-ish years, we've kind of now became so self-reliant. So I just think in 20 years, there's so much room for the greenhouse industry to improve even more.
Fair comment.
Yeah, a fair comment. Yeah, really good.
We'll have to ask somebody who was around in the 90s whether that was true.
Thank God I have two of you here.
I was going to turn around and look for that person.
Okay. Well, that was a great episode. Thank you so much, John, for taking over for me today.
Well, it's interesting to walk in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
I thought it was really the information that you shared, Lysandra, was really helpful for our listeners based on your experience. I think that would be
John. This will add to your fan club.
It will. And John, great job on the questions too, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, John, and thanks, Dave, as well. So I'll talk to you both next week.
All right.
Yep.
Look forward to it.
Okay then.
Talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye for now.
That's all for today's episode of the 360 on Energy and Carbon podcast. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check us out on our website at 360energy.net and follow us on LinkedIn at 360 Energy Inc. Tune into our podcast on Apple Music and Spotify by searching the 360 on Energy and Carbon. You can watch the video recording and subscribe on YouTube at 360 Energy Inc. See you next week.